say goodbye to heartburn, your complete guide. First of all, why do you have it? 9 reasons. You have too much acid, you have too little acid. The valve in your esophagus is weak. Your stomach is not processing or digesting your food fast enough. You have high pressure in your abdomen. I'm going to explain all of these and what to do about it. You've got a weak vagus nerve. You're under chronic stress. You have a poor diet. And lastly, you have belly fat. Okay, let's take them one by one so you really understand what to do about this, because acid reflux is a very common problem. So too much acid is a little bit of a misnomer, because really the stomach's job is to produce acid. That is its job. The only time this really gets into the arena of too much production is after you've been on a PPI or an antacid, because that has lowered your acid production over time, and your brain knows your stomach's supposed to make acid, so when it's not doing so, it asks the stomach cells to produce more. So they're busily multiplying and being able to produce more. They still can't because you're on the antacid, but then you try to get off of it and whoosh, now you're producing too much acid, and it can really make you miserable. Where the concept of too much acid comes from, of course, is acid being in the wrong place. It's supposed to be in your stomach. Your stomach's designed to be a bag of acid. But instead, that acid is coming up into your esophagus, and your esophagus, the tube connecting your mouth to your stomach, it's not designed to be bathed with acid. So, of course, you're pretty miserable, and it feels like too much. But it really is acid going the wrong direction, going up away from the stomach into the esophagus. So that leads us to how much is too much and how much is too little. So you can actually get too little acid being produced, not just by being on a medication that causes it, but just with the passage of time. So once you're over the age of 40, our bodies tend to produce less acid, which isn't good, because then your digestion is not functioning as well as it should, because in the stomach you need acid to kill bad organisms, number one, and also to absorb certain key nutrients like vitamin B12, magnesium, calcium, zinc. So these things are not happening if you have acid that's too low, and that's going to affect your body in a number of different ways. So the other thing to note, though, that's a little counterintuitive, is that you can have too little acid but still have symptoms of acid reflux. Because, and this leads to our next point, which is there are valves or doors, you can think about them, in your esophagus, in your diaphragm. Actually, there's about 10 to 15 of them throughout the body, mostly in the gut. But what they do is they sense food, drink is coming, and they open to allow it to pass, and then they close. So it's a valve, or you can think about it like a door closing. These doors act not just to close off, but with a downward pressure, which is perfect, because that's what you want. You want a pressure, you want the motion of food, drink, always to go top down. And that happens throughout the digestive tract. Everything is supposed to go top down. And the pressure of these doors or valves closing just helps keep things moving in that direction. So with too little acid, one of the doors, which connects to the stomach, is connected to how much acid you've got. So it needs the right amount of acid in order to close the door. So there's certain triggers. So in your esophagus, it's the sensation of food and drink passing. In your stomach, there has to be enough acid to keep that door closed. So you can have too little acid and the door stays open, and then it doesn't take much to bring the acid up, and you get the sensation of heartburn even though functionally you don't have enough acid. So I know that's a little counterintuitive, but it's absolutely verified this is the case. So that leads to the next problem. And by the way, with too little acid, you can supplement with hydrochloric acid, betaine hydrochloride, you trial that, see how you do, and that's something you want to discuss with your doctor, because what you absolutely want to make sure you don't do is trial hydrochloric acid if you have a stomach ulcer or an esophageal ulcer, because that's going to make it worse. So you want to be, baby steps with this and speak to your clinician before you do it. Okay, so the third point that's problematic we've just been discussing, which is this weak valve or door. And there are several things that can affect it. One, we've just been talking about, if there's not enough acid, then the valve will not have the strength that it needs to have. Another thing is one of the points of the 9 that we're going to discuss, which is the vagus nerve. And your vagus nerve is your longest cranial nerve, meaning it comes out of your brain. It comes out, passes down the front of your neck, and goes to pretty much every digestive organ, but it also goes to your heart. It also goes to your diaphragm. So it's very integrally associated with acid reflux and hiatal hernia syndrome, because the diaphragm and the heart can get affected when you have hiatal hernia. But getting back to the vagus nerve. So you want the tone, as it's called, of the vagus nerve to be optimized, because if it's not, then these valves can be weak. And you can also get heart palpitations, shortness of breath, some of those other symptoms that are correlated with this problem. So vagus nerve, assessing vagus nerve function, there are certain tests that can do that. And then treatment of vagus nerve. Now, we're not talking about the vagus nerve having been cut or traumatized in surgery. We're talking about a weaker tone. And there's simple exercises, which I'll put in the description of what you can do about that. But these are simple at-home exercises. There are also vagus nerve stimulators that are on the market that you can purchase. I can give you a link for one of those. You can just ask me in the comment if you want that. But they're very effective to increase the tone of the vagus nerve. Okay. So back to our valves, and another thing that can influence, so these 9, they connect to one another and intermingle with one another, because the next one has to do with stomach digesting food too slowly. This is known as gastroparesis. Gastro is just stomach. Paresis, you can think of it as paralysis, but it's a slowing. So it's not completely paralyzed, your stomach, but it's not moving food through as well as it should, and things just sit there. And you, as the kind of owner of a stomach doing this, that's what patients say. It's like the food just feels like it's sitting there like a brick, like nothing's digesting. And it's very uncomfortable, but it also creates a lot of pressure, because there's a lot of pressure now within the stomach. Instead of it churning the food, it takes 2 to 4 hours for food to be churned around, absorbed, the nutrients absorbed, and then passing out of the stomach. That's not happening very quickly at all. And so bad organisms can multiply, which is problematic. But having to do with reflux, it's that pressure. That pressure is building up. And now that poor valve, again, can't sustain that pressure, because it's not designed to sustain that much pressure. It opens, and now there's an escape route for that pressure as that valve opens, and acid and partially digested food come back up. So that's how that's associated. So with the gastroparesis, to get to the cause of it has to do with a few different things. You can have, this has been going on for a while, and you haven't either had enough acid or you've been on a proton pump inhibitor. And so bad organisms have been multiplying in your stomach, and then they go down the rest of your colon. But that creates a lot of inflammation. So this is where actually a lab test comes in. So this isn't an at-home treatment so much, but I want you to be aware of all the opportunities open to you. So you can do a test for what's called your microbiome, which is assessing the organisms in your gut, basically, to see what are the good guys, what are the bad guys, what's the ratio between the two, because you have a lot of inflammation and things are moving too slowly. You can also, you can look for bacteria, parasites, fungi, all of it. And so finding out what those are, and then there's natural remedies to kill them, but it's important to know what they are. Other thing is some basic things like trialing some enzymes. Once again, speak to your doctor or speak to a functional medicine clinician who really understands this, because you just don't want to do it on your own. Eating smaller meals, not getting overstuffed, and allowing the stomach to digest smaller meals. Walking after a meal, it helps a lot. You get motion. That motility of your body also helps motion in your gut. So that's very helpful. not lying down after you eat, because that will slow everything down and also push it up. Making sure you don't lie down to go to bed, as long as you want to make sure there's a good 3-hour window after dinner before you lie down. Chewing your food very well to applesauce consistency, as my registered dietitian says. So these are things that can help that. Now, you might need some more professional help, but these are definitely some tips to get you going and might be all you need. And we're going to get into a healthy diet in a minute. It's on the list as well. Again, all these factors kind of feed into one another. Okay, so we just went through number 4. There's 9 of them. Your stomach digesting too slowly. And then high pressure, also called increased intra, meaning within. High intra-abdominal pressure just means within the abdomen there's too much pressure. Now, we talked about the stomach, moving too slowly and that being pressurized, but also the surrounding organs can have inflammation, and that's creating increased pressure. You can be constipated. If you've ever been constipated quite badly, again, patients describe it as like, I feel full up to here. There's just that backup in the colon and not excreting its contents as it should, and you just feel backed up. That's where the expression comes from, and that creates a lot of pressure. You can have small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. It's known as SIBO, and that's where and this can occur secondary to being on PPIs, proton pump inhibitors, antacids, where organisms, instead of dying in that hydrochloric acid in the stomach when you eat them, which is what by design what should happen, now they happily proliferate and propagate, and you get bacteria in the small intestine. That's creating pressure and inflammation. So and that can, of course, trickle down to the dysbiosis, which is the imbalance in the lower colon. I was talking about that test a moment ago. You can also have liver and gallbladder issues, pancreas issues. You can have fatty liver. You can have bile sludge, where the bile is not flowing through the gallbladder as well as it should. So when we look at acid reflux, we really have to look at your gut in its entirety and see what organs are working the way they should and which ones are inflamed and being kind of stressed. So all the treatment is natural, though, which is great, and there's things you can look at. So with the gallbladder, do you feel worse after a fatty meal? If you eat a heavy fatty meal, do you feel worse? Do you get nauseous? Do you sometimes have stool that's yellow? These are the things that you can look for. Do you have diarrhea? And then, so I won't get into bile reflux right now. That's a whole different topic that I've done videos on. But yeah, bile can actually come up in addition to acid coming up your esophagus. So we are up to, so that's the high intra-abdominal pressure, which just creates that pressure is pushing upward, and then it pushes on the stomach, and you get reflux because of that. So then we go to the vagus nerve, and I discussed that a moment ago. So I think we've covered that pretty well. There's some exercises. Again, I'll put those in the description. Chronic stress. So stress will just take everything and make it worse. So sort of assessing where your stress is coming from is kind of topic number 1 there as far as lifestyle. And then, there's some basics we look at that you can look at, of course, is looking at your sleep, looking at, are you skipping meals? Are you overeating? Are you staying up really late and just not allowing enough time for sleep? Or is it you're allowing enough time to sleep, but your sleep quality is really compromised for whatever reason? And, in my 40 years of working with patients, I've heard the most interesting things, like, my cats fight all night and they sleep in my bedroom. Do they have to sleep in your bedroom? Couldn't they be somewhere else fighting? There's just funny things that people get into, and I'm not trying to make light of it, but sometimes that, having that outside ear, to listen and say, what are these burdens? what's getting in the way of you exercising? What's getting in the way of you eating healthy? What's getting in the way of you sleeping well? And just looking at each point, because we get so embroiled in our lives that it's hard for us, to see the forest for the trees, as the expression goes. And so, that's a lot of what we do with patients, but you have a friendly ear in your life, somebody who cares, and to say, this is what I'm running into. And it's amazing what another person's viewpoint can say. It's like, well, have you tried that? It's like, oh man, that's a good idea. I'm going to try that. So it's all about sort of seeing where that stress is located, things you can do something about. Now, there's stressors in our lives that we can't really do things about. Maybe we have a stressful job, but we don't feel able to get a new job. It's like, okay, so let's handle all the other aspects of life that we can, and not so much focus on the stressor we can't do much about. Also, in the category of stress, we have stress coming from hormonal imbalance, stress coming from being in fight or flight, the nervous system being in fight or flight. And an interesting association is that you can have acid reflux, you can have a lot of gut inflammation, which is what acid reflux causes. And that, the gut-brain connection is a very strong one, and that can put you in fight or flight. That can put you in the environment of you can't deal with stress very well just because of what's happening with your gut. And that's a very real connection. So everything we're talking about to get the gut less inflamed can make you more relaxed and take down your stress level, which is exciting. So then we get to a bad diet. We could talk forever on that, but the basics here are you drinking enough water, and are you eating real food? So what's real food? It's not highly processed food. It's not food that comes from a fast food restaurant. It's not food that has an ingredient list that's, yay long. You're eating an apple, it's an apple. You're eating some broccoli, it's broccoli. You're eating a steak, it's red meat. It doesn't have an ingredient list. It's just the food. And the more we can go to that and get enough protein and get enough fruits and vegetables and good fats and nuts and seeds, be hydrated, get some exercise, move. I know that's outside the diet, but it's diet and lifestyle. These basic things that you just each day, before you go to the fast food restaurant, you think, what else could I do? I could just get some protein powder and a piece of fruit and some plain nuts. It's like, okay, that wasn't an extravagant lunch, but it was like real food. I'm talking about a high quality protein powder. And then okay, I'll make myself a couple of hard-boiled eggs. Okay, good. I'll grab a piece of fruit and some nuts or half an avocado. It's getting in the groove, slow but sure. And that's, again, what we do with our patients, is just sort of hold their hand through that transition. But these steps, we talk about it all the time. We just had our staff meeting this week, and this very ill woman, we do what's called a root cause protocol diet, and it's identifying food sensitivities. And she was saying, she goes, I was referred to you years ago, and I've thought about it for so long, and I'm like, I'm kind of mad. I'm happy, but I'm really mad. And I'm mad because I waited so long, because here I am having suffered, she has irritable bowel syndrome type D, which is diarrhea, for chronic, pretty miserable, can hardly eat anything. And here she is 3 weeks into some dietary change. We don't even have her lab test back yet. And she's like, oh gosh, all my symptoms are gone. I'm so happy and I'm so mad. And I think you can relate to those two contrary emotions. But it doesn't have to be difficult. Sometimes it's really easy. Yeah, sometimes it's more complex. But what we always talk about here is like foundational lifestyle, foundational basics. And it's if you miss the basics, you've missed it all. And that's something we never miss with our patients, and you cannot miss it with yourself. So last but not least is the belly fat. So what happens with the belly fat is it, well, in the belly, it tends to infiltrate inside into organs. So you can get fatty liver, you can get just all that fat around the abdomen creates that increased intra-abdominal pressure again. So, and that creates, pressure up on the diaphragm, pressure up on the stomach. You get the reflux, you get the hiatal hernia. So, but how do you handle belly fat? It's really all the things we've talked about, right? You want to clean up the diet. You want to eat sensibly sized meals. You want to make sure you're getting your sleep. I mean, there's been plenty of studies where they've taken, 22-year-old robust young men that, were of completely ideal weight, and they just didn't allow them to, allowed them to sleep for maybe 4 hours or 5 hours instead of their needed 8.5. And they gained weight. They didn't change their diet at all. So don't think that a lot of things don't contribute. Stress contributes to belly fat. Sleep contributes. Of course, exercise, movement of the body. Hydration contributes. And of course, the quality of your diet contributes. And we've got, are you turning your food into fuel? Because your body is amazing in its compensatory abilities, meaning if you're on an antacid, or if you're, you have a diet that's high in sort of non-food, your metabolism slows down because your body says, I'm not really getting enough nourishment here, so I'm not going to burn many calories. So then your waistline's expanding, even though I'm not really eating that much. It's all about the quality. So there's a lot that can be done about that. So this was a lot. I know I've been talking for a long time. Hopefully you're hanging in there with me. But acid reflux is very common. It's all too commonly treated with a PPI, a proton pump inhibitor, that has many dangerous side effects, from increased infections because you don't have the acid to kill the bad guys, to osteoporosis, kidney disease, heart disease, stomach cancer, dementia. Serious conditions are associated with these drugs, and so they're not an answer. They are not an answer. You've got to get to the root cause of why it's happening. So I'd love to hear your questions. By the way, I love your comments, so I answer pretty much everyone I get that is a question, I answer. So send me your comments, and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy this information. And yeah, send me your questions that you thought of as a result of this video. And I look forward to talking to you soon.